where is it that you, as a community, that you get the conversation going about the right to vote, the importance of voting, and how often you hear that when something comes home from school, it has a way of getting to their parents' attention more so than, you know, other ways. Do you know if they do anything in the high schools here to talk about elections?
Well, when I was in high school, we didn't even have a civics class. So I'm excited that my stepson actually had to take a civics class, and I thought that was really exciting because he had all sorts of questions. So more at the state level, making sure all of the high school students take a civics class would be a really good place to start. And then within that civics class, if as the community as a whole, individuals such as those in this room could go to that civics class and really bring the community conversation to the students, I think would be really helpful, because their teachers just stand up at the board and explain things day after day after day. But if someone outside from the community came in and said, this is why this is important, that would be really helpful, because that particular generation, I think, is more disenfranchised than the people who got disenfranchised over the last 4 years, because they see it at the federal level. They really don't. They know that there's local government, kind of, sort of, but they really just see the federal stuff on TV. And that looks like such a disaster that, again, they don't even want to be blamed for what's going on. Okay.
Trying to resurrect the football team. When a new coach comes in, brings in all the people with them, so now we're seeing a transition in the mayor office, one way or another. What can we expect in the way of transitions into departments, department heads, you know, kind of thing? Is it usually a wholesale swap, or?
Well, I'm going to make a lot of very bold statements. I'm going to say that the current mayor made a lot of changes that certain people in the community felt needed to take place, and my personal opinion, I don't see either of the two candidates that are currently in the runoff making wholesale changes until they've assessed the situation. There was an impression in the community that people who were working at the city had been there forever, and therefore were entrenched in whatever ways that those were, good, bad, or otherwise. And in order to have a fresh start, those particular positions needed to be transitioned. Well, we definitely have a fresh start. In my opinion, the poor city has been ravaged, and whoever the next mayor is, the least amount of movement in those positions would be the best. Because it's not going to help anybody to have that turmoil keep happening and people being worried that they're going to get fired, or they can't say something, or they can't do something, because it just puts the entire city in gridlock. And you can see it on our streets, you can see it on everything around you. You can even see it in the people that did or didn't vote. So I think it's in the next mayor's best interest to really assess the situation, look at the individuals in those positions, and then move forward. Because one thing that's very vital is the institutional knowledge that those people have at the city. And from personal experience, people who work for the city do so because they love the city, not because they like the benefits, not because they like getting yelled at, not because of all the torture they have to go through, but they really love the city, because you wouldn't voluntarily put yourself through that if you didn't really love the city. It's been brutal for the last 4 years, and I only hope the next 4 years are more of a calm period to really bring this city back to where we should be. Sorry, Charles is next.
I have a question about the young people. You said that many young people were disenfranchised. How is it possible that a young family can not have two wage employees of the home and still maintain a relatively safe lifestyle without having the burden of all of the problems that they individually have to solve? What's the solution to an intellectual young person earning a living that will permit some small amount of time for civic endeavor?
It's quite a loaded question.
That's the way I perceive our city, I'm sorry.
No, that's the nation. I mean, that's more of a national question. Being one of those people who is living in a two-income household that would love to not be working, the difference between those who have and those who have not is huge. And that's not something that's necessarily local, that is national, and that is a trend that just keeps going and getting worse. So I will espouse my own opinion. When you go through the 2008-2009 real estate bubble crash, whatever you want to call it, those of us who are, I would put under the $500,000 a year range, most people in this room probably, didn't have the ability to win coming and going on that. Essentially what happened is laws were changed, loans were made that people knew, and I believe they knew, were going to default. You can't give a house to someone without having to prove their income and expect they're going to pay for that house for the next 30 years. So they gave out loans, and then it crashed. Well, the best part is they knew it was going to crash. So therefore, they bought insurance against the crash. So they made money when they handed out the loans, and then on top of that, they made more money when the bottom fell out, and they insured against the fact that the bottom was going to fall out. So that's how we ended up in this particular situation, is because when you hold the crystal ball, you really know whether it's going up or going down. And the rest of us who are not in the crystal ball room are just left to deal with the outfall of that. So I think that put a lot of people in turmoil, because you had high foreclosures, you had high layoffs, you had high unemployment, and all of those people were trying to put their lives back together in the last 7 years. And that really does not leave a lot of time for civic engagement, because I wasn't around in the 1950s, but those of you who work, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like life was slightly more simpler back then, because you got a job, and you got a house, and you worked there, and then you paid off your house, and then you retired, and you enjoyed your grandkids, and it was a wonderful time. Now that's not really the case. I don't even know anybody that stayed in the same job since I graduated from college. So the notion of that particular stability is also disappearing. So trying to throw civic engagement in and all of that is very difficult, which is why I applaud the rising professionals. They're really trying to do their best to reach out to those people and bring them in, as opposed to hoping that they will pay attention in the middle of all of the mail that they're getting in bills and stuff to do for the kids and everything else. So one thing we're doing in Colorado Springs is we're trying to extend a hand to those people and bring them in instead of wait for them to find us.
So the differentiation is of positive and negative is always positive for some people, and it is always negative for others.
You're talking about income?
Yeah, for numerical evaluation, yes.
It's getting that way. Yeah, we remain
How do we thwart that inevitability as you propose?
Education, education, education.
And intellect doesn't buy young people anything.
No, but I think it will eventually. Eventually you're going to get to that tipping point where people realize that there will be a point you can't survive on a two-person income anymore. Would you like me to write that? And when that happens, that's when you're going to wake people up. When two people have a job and they still can't make ends meet, then you're going to have people that are just going to go throw their hands up and say, I don't know what to do. And there's going to have to be places there to catch them, and that might be phase 2 of the rising professionals, is how to keep the rising professionals from being homeless. Did the lady behind you have a question? Molly, did you have a question?
I was just going to piggyback on high school's too late to start educating kids. You should start in kindergarten. That was just my comment.
Okay. Thank you, we're next.
You were talking about the city staff and the turnover, et cetera, et cetera. And the next mayor is going to take measured steps. And do you would you envision, for less turmoil, would you envision any of the folks that have left city government in the last 4 years, bringing them back?
Again, my personal opinion, I would envision one. I would say most of the people that were let go in the 2011, 2012 timeframe have already reestablished where they are. There's one particular individual that I will leave anonymous that was recently let go. And I really think, for whatever reason, I think that would be a good position to bring that person back on an interim basis and then bring some stability to that particular department and then keep going. But I can't, of the people I know that have left, I don't know that they would want to come back. They might come back as on an advisory level, but I don't know if full-time. They had been there a very long time, and I think for the most part the positions have been replaced rather well within the city. Charles?
We have a population in this city. One, we have homeless, and I wrote an editorial in March 17th Gazette about that. Thank you for your candid responding to me. But we also have another segment of population that make $9 an hour, and they're only able to work 1,500 hours maximum if they work for the city. If they work over that, any amount of it, they cannot work for a full year. Right now, that's because of the health insurance requirement, and they don't want to pay the health insurance. So basically, you have a huge number of people. I'm on the Parks Board, so I know a lot of these people work in our community centers. And so they can make a maximum of $13,500 a year. So even if you have two working full-time at 1,500 hours, so you have a lot of people that are literally on the edge. They're in food pantries. They are, I mean, we have a major problem. Now, we spend about $49 million in-kind services on the homeless. If we just only spent half that and put the investment into the people that are pretty close on the edge anyway. So, I mean, how do you see us addressing that population that is on the cusp of being homeless and keeping them from being homeless?
Well, I think that starts at the federal level with the national health care laws, and then really moves to the local level. And having the, like you said, the check and balance conversation is we can spend less here, and then we don't have to spend as much here. And that sounds like a good decision to make, and I think one of the things that needs to be in conjunction with that, also with the homelessness, is health care for mental health. Because I think that would help also to reduce our homeless population, and that's one thing I hope for the Colorado Springs Pikes Peak Foundation. I'm not sure what the official name ended up being, but the monies that came from the Memorial Hospital lease to really kind of tackle that issue. But it's really going to take someone sitting down and doing the math and saying, do we want to spend the money twice, because essentially that's what it ends up being, or do we want to spend it once? So I think that's just someone who's got to pencil that out and make that particular decision. I like spending the money once. There are those who like spending it twice. So it really just depends upon who is making that decision.
I'd like to make a comment, and then also have a separate question if we don't have much time. Regarding your comment about, where is there time for civic responsibility? I think, while distribution is a huge contentious issue in our country, I think, maybe I'm idealistic, but I think strong neighborhoods can help alleviate that to a certain degree because of the social cohesion and the sort of support that they create that allow for people to have more flexibility with their schedules and that kind of thing. And that has to come from people that can live and work within a reasonable distance, and it's more than just people knowing each other. It goes deeper than that, but I think that we can alleviate that to a certain degree by pushing the stronger neighborhoods. So
Each of us has a bit of responsibility, don't we?
to do, right?
And actually, if you don't mind my
Sure.
piling onto this, that there's been a lot of social science research that shows that that investment, if we invest in social, what's called social capital, us knowing each other, we can see that where neighborhoods have that sort of good social capital going on, people know each other and work with each other and that sort of thing, those neighborhoods tend to be physically healthier, mentally healthier, economically more well-off, and safer. If you're interested, there's now an ancient book, not to me, but to somebody like Tony, that was done in, I think, about the 80s. Robert Putnam did a book called Bowling Alone, and then followed, are you familiar with it? Okay. Followed that up with a book, Better Together, and that's basically his whole point, is we are better off if we are working together.
And I would bet those neighborhoods are more civically engaged.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
I would bet those neighborhoods are more civically engaged also. That's a guess.
Yeah, no, that's part of what he was talking about when he talked about social capital, is that people are more involved with each other's lives, with helping each other. It's more the Brandy's great-grandmother syndrome, my grandmother's syndrome, that you know,